Thank you for coming. My name's Allison Collins. I'm the Adult Public Programs Coordinator here at the Vancouver Art Gallery. And it's my pleasure to welcome Samara Astor from Canadian Art Foundation. She's going to introduce us to today's panel and get us going.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on this beautiful day. I know that we'd probably like to be out in the sun, but I appreciate you all being here. I'd like to just begin quickly by explaining a bit about the Canadian Art Foundation Gallery Hop Day. Obviously, we're all here for this exciting public discussion, Painting and Materiality. I encourage you all after the talk to join one of our 4 gallery tours that are happening this afternoon, 1:30 till 3 and then 3:30 till 5. Gastown, Chinatown, Main Street, and Great Northern Way, so choose your own tour and your own adventure. There's also off-site and off-tour activities happening downtown at various galleries around, so grab yourself a printout or check out our website for more information. And we encourage you all to also come at 6 till 8. We've got a magazine launch for the spring issue of Canadian Art at the Contemporary Art Gallery. So we welcome you all there as well. I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth McIntosh, who will be leading our discussion today. And thank you once again.
So thank you to Samara and Canadian Art for giving us this opportunity to have this panel today. We've actually had some pretty interesting conversations leading up to this discussion, so it's been a good experience so far. Today, what we're going to do is I will just give a brief introduction, and then each artist is going to sort of introduce themselves. But to my right, my left, my right is Jeremy Hof, Angela Teng, Colleen Heslin, and Emily Hill. And each of these artists was asked to participate on this panel because they make work that has a unique, interesting, and challenging relationship to material. I have a little quote that I dug up from an interview that I did a few years ago around a show I was curating. It's a quote by the Vancouver artist Mina Totino, and it was a discussion between Mina Totino, Monique Mouton, and a Toronto artist named Sally Spaeth. And the actual title of the interview is Painting, Material Moments, and the Fictions of Matter. And I just thought it would be a nice kind of segue into the discussion. So Mina said, is in response to a question, but I think the modernist paradigm has been sloughed off like a snake's skin. Our play with those historical strictures is performative now, and I find myself concerned with the pathological investigation of that painterly history. I'm interested in the real materials of this medium for new ways to make painting viable. The intent of this kind of painting is to make the materiality of the paint represent the thought of these critical concerns. But facts are closely linked to the truth, and that is a trepidatious thought, exclamation mark. The fact of the matter of paint as subject is much clearer to me when linked to our material approach and our acts of mental and manual dexterity. I like to think that facts can be torqued to make good fiction. So yeah, to begin with, we have asked each artist to speak to how they think through the specific material approach that defines their practice. It's not a narrowing or an attempt to identify a particular inclination within the practice of painting at this moment. It's just one strand of a much larger discussion. So, yeah, Jeremy, can you take over?
Sure. Get the slide down. I'm going to give like a quick summary of my understanding of painting within my practice. Basically, my work kind of hovers between sculpture and painting, and I use paint as an object, either by casting solid objects out of solid paint or building up thick layers of paint and then carving back into the surface. The works that are going to scroll through are all all relatively, yeah, they're all brand new works, and they're showing kind of different variations of a kind of a general approach or systemization. The works either start on a panel or a canvas or even a three-dimensional form, and then I build up the surface of the support with layers and layers of acrylic paint, and then I then carve back into the surface to reveal the composition inside. So everything you're seeing up there is basically layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of acrylic paint that I then carve into. So there's this additive and subtractive kind of approach. Most of the paintings take about, on average, maybe 2 years. I have one that I'm still working on from 2009, so that's going on to 5 years. So it's a really slow, laborious process where I'm constantly working in the studio, constantly, like, I have, you know, multiple paintings in different stages of the process. So each time I go to the studio, I have endless work to do. Once the application part of the process is finished, I then carve into the work with carving tool, and it's a rotary carving tool that's used in stone and wood carving, and then I finish it by hand by sanding it, and it gets like to a high gloss finish just from sheer polish, like just sanding and then polishing. The color compositions are they're all kind of based on my own subjectivity. Like a lot of them, I incorporate colors that I don't like, so I intentionally have to expand my color vocabulary in a way that I wouldn't usually use colors that, in my opinion, are not nice colors. I'll try and blend them in with an overall composition that's actually okay. Sure. This work here in particular that we've been stuck on for a while is a new approach where I'm actually kind of painting it, the underpainting, as like an abstract expressionist. Like I'm just kind of slopping on colors, whatever's on the brush, just laying it on, where in other works is a predetermined kind of composition where I want to do a gradation from one color to the other, so I know exactly where to start and finish. Where this variation, I'm just kind of applying whatever excess paint I have or whatever random leftover paint I can find, and then when I carve into it, I don't necessarily know what I'm going to get. Whereas on the other more kind of calculated compositions, I know what's beneath the painting because I put the layers there. But when I'm sanding it, there's no kind of guarantee. There's like a pretty substantial chance for error. So I could work on a painting for 2 years and then ruin it by carving it too deep and going straight through the back of the panel or something. There we go. There's slight variations in how I finish the work, creates quite a different kind of material result. Like this one here, it's a rather large painting, and I've left the edges and the surface really rough. So you can see the brush strokes, you can see the globs of the accumulation for painting it for years on end, whereas like the previous one was very clean, crisp and sharp, more of a minimalist object. This is kind of more embracing the material, the viscosity of the paint, and kind of letting it build up and show the process. I'm not really trying to hide the process. Some works reveal it more, some works are more sort of based on aesthetic decisions. I'm making them look a certain way, so it's a bit more of a mystery. This is a three-dimensional work. This is the view from behind. It's actually just a block that I painted 3 sides of it. So I treat it as like a 3-sided painting. So when you see it from the front, maybe that picture will come up. It's treated like all the other paintings. I sanded, carved it, and then on the back has the kind of a flanged edge where the layers of paints incrementally get larger and larger, so the outside of the painting kind of gets bigger and bigger. So all these works are extremely laborious and based like solely on the studio process. And I thought that like my interest in painting and sculpture kind of comes twofold. Like my interest in color is, I'm very interested in color, and paint is the perfect material manifestation of color. And then I like making things three-dimensionally, and I like form. So it was a very natural kind of connection to kind of investigate the dialogue between the two. And for me, it was a way to provide a kind of source of innovation, where like I came across this process which creates these objects which are pretty they're unique and special in their own way.
Good. Thank you. Hi. I don't know if too many people are familiar with my work, but it's coming, I'm sure. Well, first of all, I guess I can talk about how I'm interested in the materiality of paint and its transformative potential. I often feel like when I'm in the studio, like I'm sort of an inventor or a scientist of some sort. I kind of, like Jeremy, like set up like a systematic way of making paintings. Maybe we can just leave it on that one for a second. And I set up like a control where it's kind of, I'm set in the structure of making a painting. So what I'm doing is I'm working with acrylic paint and squeezing it out into strips of kind of paint yarn and crocheting it. So I'm actually kind of creating a painting just with paint. So yeah, anyways. I guess I can talk about a little bit how I started working with just paint itself. When I was at Emily Carr, I started working with paint skins, and it's kind of actually in response to Jeremy's work, where I found his work really kind of hard-edged and masculine, and I really admire his work, but I kind of had this conscious decision to set out and make a kind of feminized version of kind of what he's doing. So I was taking kind of woman's craft of crochet and kind of making these floppy objects that are, literally soft, but then they also function like a painting as well. So maybe I can also talk about, I guess, process and the labor involved in making these. This one, for example, I think took about 70 hours to crochet. The paint can be quite stubborn at times. So I'm kind of forced to sit in the studio and just kind of pluck away at these paintings. And kind of gives me a lot of time to think and consider, formally how I'm going to construct them. Certain paintings I do set out with complete kind of idea of how it's going to look in the end, but working with this paint is really unpredictable, so there's always an element of surprise when they're finished. And yeah, maybe can switch to some other images.
Could you speak about the scale?
Oh yeah, so the last work was probably 3 feet by 3 feet square. Oh, there's a close-up. So I'm trying a bunch of different ways of working with the paint, and here I've marbled it with 7 different colors. This one's called 7-color crochet, and it's, I believe, I know Will might know, it's like 13 by 20, I believe. So the scale varies. That one's probably 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet. It's called Hubba Bubba. But it's kind of funny because I feel like I am like a real painter. I'm not using the brush at all when I'm making these paintings, but it's not to say that I've totally excluded that process. I also kind of work in my studio with oil paint, and I'm still making like paintings on canvas. And I'm also, I'm considering kind of all elements of how to make a painting. So I'm also taking raw and creating the canvas itself by crocheting the surface and then painting on that. Okay, yeah. So this one's called Lick Lip, and you can see the edge is the crocheted cotton, which is the canvas, and then I've just brushed on the oil paint. So it's kind of like I make these like really fast within, of course, like the laboring of the surface takes hours, but then I paint them, it'll just take 20 minutes. But I'm mixing like a vast amount of paint at one time. So I kind of need to work in this kind of fast and slow way, and then also I kind of look at it as being kind of tight and loose as well, like the real structured tightness of the act of crocheting, and then also like allowing myself this freedom to paint in the studio with kind of, I don't know, freely. I just don't want to kind of get stuck into one style of making paintings. So, yeah.
You also make kind of more gestural paintings.
Yeah.
Are they included or?
Yeah, they are. Yes. Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
there we go.
So this is oil on found linen. I don't have the edge to show you, but and the edge is really important to me. I'm always kind of, every painting has to kind of exceed the edge of the painting. And I've also, like this is brushed on with a brush, and then I've also gone in with my fingers. So it's kind of this play between the brush and my hand and in the making. So, yeah. And also, my oil paintings are like act as studies for my crochet work, I think. If it's just color or a composition, I just seem to make the oil paintings really kind of organically and fast, and they're not overthought. It's just, I'll pick a color, but like whatever mood I'm in, I'll just choose this color, or if I just see, you know, a woman's lipstick walking down the street, I'll immediately go into the studio and mix a massive amount of oil paint, and then like it could just be as simple as that for inspiration for color. And so yeah, everything's kind of working in a secular form. So yeah.
Okay, thanks, Angela.
Okay.
So I've been thinking a lot about material presence and the qualities that materials have and how they can affect you, and differences between natural and more synthetic materials. A lot of the ways that I was looking at a lot of abstraction in painting, and I've been thinking a lot about color and mark making and texture, and going through like a process of experimentation, working with various types of materials, and there was a point where I felt like inclined that my practice was going to become more engaged with painting in a way where I was working with larger brushes and bigger, like thicker paint, and then there was a moment when I was just more interested in a lighter quality. I felt like there was a weight in the history of painting, a weight in the canvas seemed heavy to me. So and oil paint became, there was a plasticity to it that I became really interested in staining. So I worked a lot. I began to work with acrylic stains with loose pigment and ink and fabric dye, and I began emerging these found domestic materials like cotton sheets and linen, and hanging them sort of like you would hang your laundry. Only I was dirtying them and hanging them, and then just becoming aware of these points of interest, like and I noticed when I was working with these stains that there was I have worked with photography for a while, and I noticed that there was this print-like quality that was happening through this process, where it was this really simple form of making a print or a photograph, where I was the shape that I was laying the material became imprinted just through gravity and water. So that was, and I was very interested in simplifying my studio practice in a way where I could find something that was interest, but that it was also of interest to me in terms of the methodologies involved, and was engaging. And I think originally, so these works, I stained the fabric, and I got really interested in collage, and so the logistics of working large scale, and also continuing to reference painting. I began to sew these stained fabrics together, and originally I think a part of the response was this awareness to these masculine and feminine sensibilities that I was noticing, but in the end, I found that my decisions were very much guided by just what was of interest to me, and just very much interested in having a studio practice where I was very much aware of like moments within the process of making, where I was interested in a sense of lightness, a sense of openness, and a presence. So the decision. So I was thinking a lot about the material in terms of having a conversation with it, and I guess in a conversation where it's also this time, I guess, in your studio where you are spending time by yourself. So and so there's like, for me, I guess there's a bit of an intimacy with that, and and wanting to, and for me also getting interested in like more metaphysical concerns, like the causality of like just material and the cause and effect of that for me, like working like with my hands was like very important and rewarding, just in terms of like just understanding the material world and working with material in a way where it's material that had a lot of the materials coming from a domestic space. And I was really thinking a lot about these notions of like value of labor, and in terms of space, like the domestic, the studio, the workspace, and really wanting to sort of like blur these lines and engage with materials and methods that were like thinking of painting in terms of it having this high status, and interested in sort of it diffusing any like pejorative ideas that maybe people have. And coming to a point in my work where I began to see that, especially working at this moment in time with painting, that the like limitations of what makes a painting is really just the limitations that you're setting on yourself in your studio. And once this opened up, like a lot of my the experimentation and the material are important, but in the end, a lot of the decisions I make are aesthetic, and they're really much engaged with color and texture and mark making. So, yeah, that's been like my practice for the last couple of years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Emily?
Hi, everyone. So thanks for coming and having me. I'm showing slides here today from a recent show that I had at, that was called Air Spill, that was last month at Macaulay & Co. Fine Art here in Vancouver. This slide was hung on a small wall right before the entrance to the main gallery, where vinyl lettering might be for an exhibition in that space. And the canvas was washed, it's a hand-woven canvas that I made that's dry brushed on with chalk pastel. And before I applied the chalk pastel, I washed it in hot water and let it sort of dry on the wall. And I actually made the painting in the gallery, the chalk pastel painting, that is. And so I was thinking about this topic and trying to relate it to this recent work of mine, and I thought of maybe materiality, or the question is another way of saying materiality, maybe just matters reality. And I kind of liked that play with text, and I'm kind of coming back to that in my little talk today, where I kind of connect text and textiles. So that question leads me to ask myself, what is matters reality in this kind of play on words or something? In preparing for this talk, I also decided that I kept kind of thinking of this idea that rhyme is like an alternative to reason. So I thought of coming up with some rhymes with materiality. And I matched the word instrumentality. So materiality, instrumentality to this work, to kind of think about this obscure connection. And there was kind of this, the paintings that are coming up in the show are works that I made on shag rugs. They're dyed. So there's kind of this unstable surface, and this chalk pastel painting kind of emphasizes that sort of impermanence that textiles are kind of prone to. An Oxford English Dictionary defines instrumentality as the fact or quality of serving as an instrument or means to an end. And this piece is called Bikini Silhouette. So, next slide. The next work here is called Diluted Delusion, and it's logwood, so natural dye and acid dye with dye stripper. So again, that kind of additive and subtractive process is going on here, where there's a lot of dye added and then stripped away. And each panel in this image is 5 by 8 feet, so it's quite all-encompassing when you're standing in front of it. And I rhymed materiality, split personality, and I thought that worked with the diptych well. And the OED defines split personality as a rare dissociative disorder in which 2 or more personalities with distinct memories and behaviors patterns apparently exist in one individual. And it's an archaic term for schizophrenia. So the next image, please. Not the one, but that's okay. All right, I'll skip down. It doesn't have to be in order.
There's one there.
Oh, there we go. So this work is called Schemes, and it's acid dye and dye stripper. So again, this one actually had a lot of surprises. And I kind of go through this process of grooming the work with a carder, which is a brush for wool. So there's sort of these gestures that are happening a lot in the last work, actually. On top of the dyed gestures, where there's this kind of literal like extra brush mark that's brushed into the wool. And so this kind of painting went through a lot of stages as far as dyeing, stripping, going through the washing machine, coming out differently, and kind of going for it again. And so I rhymed it with materiality, eventuality, a possible event or outcome. So I think that kind of magically relates to some ideas about materiality just through happenstance. And I think eventuality, or just like these kind of surprise outcomes, are super important to me in making these works. And I always have to remind myself when things are coming out super kind of unexpectedly that that's something I want. And I don't know, I've heard somewhere that sight is kind of this place where you either kind of recognize something or are surprised by something, and I'm really satisfied when that surprise element is part of the visual experience. So the next image is called Starlit Socks. And it's just acid dye on wool rug. And it was just one application of color onto these runner panels that are 2 foot 4 inches by 8 foot each, and it's also a diptych. But obviously one panel is on the wall, and then the second panel is on the floor. So I liked that connection to materiality, impartiality, treating all rivals or disputants equally, fair and just is the definition. So there's sort of this like, again, this is sort of a rhyme that may not have a reason to the work, but it fits. And also there's also this other color of pink that appears in the washing machine is like just the initial red marks bleeding out into the rest of the panel in the washing machine. And so I like that those kind of like mistakes or rivals or something fit into that idea of impartiality to like how the marks happen. Thicker Ticker is the next work, and it's also got natural dye and acid dye. So that's the synthetic dye, as well as cochineal that's actually a beetle. So this is a lot of blood in this painting. So we've got a mixture of cochineal, acid dye, a wool rug, gel, chalk pastel, and hairspray. So it's 8 foot round, and I rhymed materiality, sentimentality, excessive tenderness, sadness, and nostalgia was the one that made its way into that work. And amazingly, there was only 9 words that had 6 syllables that rhymed with materiality. They all found a home. The next shot's an install shot of my show, and I had materiality, conditionality. So I thought that was sort of a nice way of putting dealing with kind of gallery spaces and these conditions that you show work in. And I think those are important things to maybe address as another material in painting, as far as when they do become in this space. That's sort of something that I try to consider as a material as valid as sort of the wool panels themselves. I'll show you the next install shot. This one's rhymed materiality, collegiality. So this is like relating or involving shared responsibilities as among a group of colleagues. And then I thought of it as paintings kind of relate to each other as colleagues in a group setting. And the last install shot is that leads into the idea that we are all here as artists whose works are supposedly sort of challenging traditional boundaries of the medium, and whose hybrid approaches leads us to consider painting as a means and not an end. And that was the first rhyme, was for the chalk pastel painting, I had instrumentality, and Oxford said that instrumentality serves as a means to an end. So I wanted to come back to that and say that I think it is an interesting sort of common ground to be trying to work with a material as a means by means, and not sort of this means by end, or means with an end sort of idea. So my art practice does kind of oscillate between the material vocabularies of textiles and painting. And I understand materials to be these sort of intelligent counterparts, and things with both practical and poetic applications. So I was introduced to the idea of textiles as text in an art history class at Capilano University, where we looked at how paintings and textiles have been read, so to speak. And I like considering the material of language alongside the materials of paint, dye, canvas, and fiber as all kind of having a unique type of material intelligence. And as well, just the text kind of being this option to add another sort of practical and poetic application when talking about work. So the last slide, second to last slide, sorry, is Boiled, and this was just a work that was in a separate, smaller gallery in the show. And it's got dye stripper, chalk pastel, hairspray, acid dye, and is 5 by 7 feet. Then the last rhyming word was materiality, originality. So the quality of being novel and unusual, and it was off by itself in its own little room. So the last slide then is this image that kind of popped up early. Yeah. It's a performance that happened really briefly at the opening called Woman Running with Ocelot Fur. And it was very brief. I didn't really announce the performance, but I kind of like this idea that it was going to be a quick mirage where this runner just kind of sprints through the gallery and does one lap and becomes like maybe a temporary compositional element in this fur coat. And the last rhyming word I have is materiality, proportionality. And I liked proportionality is sort of defined as corresponding in size or amount to something else. And there's another definition that said, the quotient obtained when the magnitude of a part is divided by the magnitude of the whole. And so that kind of macro-micro relationship, I feel like, is a nice quality to paintings where you have this option to kind of get in really close and experience the sort of physical reality of them, where that's like a very important part of the medium for me. And then as well as being able to stop back, and your body becomes this scale that's very kind of consequence. So this body that kind of passes through the work can bring that up as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll try to continue a bit of a conversation here, and I don't know, just I've been making I've been making a few notes while you were talking. There's so many kind of possible directions for this conversation, but maybe I'll just throw out a few ideas and see where you guys want to take it. But one idea is labor versus immediacy. That seems like a strong element in everybody's work. Another, that nobody is taking the beginning format of painting for granted. Like there's basically every variety of, or many different kind of approaches here to even how to start a painting. So I think that's really interesting. So anybody want to take up one of those points, or I can throw something else out.
I found that, like, for me, that was something that really activated this was, it felt like a writer, like looking at a blank piece of paper, like having the blank canvas. And for me, this was a way of the experimentation, even just with the surface area that I was working on. I found when I took the painting off the wall and I started working on the floor, and I started working, like, once I started working with non-traditional materials, that weight that I was talking about earlier just sort of lifted, and it really helped engage myself with the process that I was in, and I felt more connected to it, and I felt like it was something where it was really this conversation between me and I guess in a way it was a way of taking things that I was aware of and looking at historically, and sort of like pushing them away and developing my own methods of working. That was really important to me, and a part of how I got there was avoiding the blank canvas.
Or like Emily, I was pretty surprised when Sarah told me that you had woven your own canvas. I don't know if you guys caught on to that, but the first piece you showed, the bikini silhouette. Yeah, the actual canvas itself is woven, and Angela's also making her own woven support. So I'm wondering how that kind of, you're talking about sort of fear of beginning a painting, but if you spend all of this time, I mean, not that you all experience that, because that isn't even how any of you work, but if you think about all of that time that you spend weaving support, it must really affect what happens when you pick up the paintbrush or the chalk or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, I think I kind of had a goal going into hand weaving those canvases, that I had kind of reached a point where I wanted to like interchangeably almost like let this pass for a ready-made canvas or something, and I feel like the edges of it are like my handmade salvages, and they're pretty obviously like something's kind of up with them, but the surface itself, I was pretty happy with how it does kind of disguise itself as maybe a ready-made canvas, and for me, that's kind of where like the tension becomes interesting. It's like it's kind of like this hidden effort, because as much as I feel like the dyed rugs have to be kind of this ready-made woven material, they are hand woven, like in their production. So yeah, I kind of think about those kinds of like hidden labors or something, and I kind of like subjecting myself to this position of maybe like the hidden weaver or something.
Yeah, no, I mean, you wouldn't, it's kind of a nice little bit of information to find out after you've already seen the piece, and then you realize that it looks different, like it has some kind of sort of quirky particularities about it that,
right,
yeah, it doesn't look machine made.
Right. And then that's like, yeah, I like how those marks do end up kind of becoming this other gesture within the work, for sure.
And then, but it can even take that to Jeremy's, spending 2 years building up a support, and that his gesture with the router and that kind of one shot is very similar to your kind of, after, probably doesn't take 2 years to make a piece of cloth, but yeah.
No, yeah, no, exactly.
I don't feel that mine are like, I'm kind of maybe assuming that when you crochet or weave, it becomes precious in a way. I don't feel that my paintings are precious. Sorry, I don't feel, I'm speaking about, in my case, that I don't feel that there's a sense of preciousness before I carve into it. It's more, because I could do it again and I wouldn't mind. Like, I really I take great pleasure in the process of building the works. Mm-hmm. So there's no, I don't get sentimental about it. It would just be a setback in time and material. Like, it's not, if I make a mistake, I might be able to do something else that I didn't intend, but I don't have a moment where I'm like, oh, this is a precious thing that I've created in 2 years. Like, it's because in those 2 years, I really enjoyed what I was doing for those 2 years. Like, I would have done it anyway, sort of thing. So it's like for me anyway, I'm not building this kind of sense of, oh, now I gotta really make this into artwork. Like, there's no like.
Yeah. No, I try and avoid that feeling exactly.
And
like, especially I think like, that panel's one of like maybe 7 that size or something that I wove at once, and you kind of get in this routine of just going and sort of chunking off some weaving, and it becomes this kind of mindless like production kind of mode activity. And it's really relaxing to kind of have those options when you're making these other works that are maybe really exhausting, that's to go back to something that's sort of just like this go-to project.
There's no anxiety in not knowing what to do.
And
you're like, I'm going to go to my studio, in your case, I'm going to weave, I'm going to crochet. Yeah. Like, I know when I go to my studio, I don't have to think about what I'm going to do. I just know what I'm going to do because I have 20 paintings on the go. Like,
and I think by the time you've kind of cut them all up, they do just kind of become these ready-made panels. Like, I think that's, you kind of forget all of a sudden, and then it's just like paper or something.
Mm-hmm. I think also like the idea of preciousness can really like inhibit your gesture, and the gesture becomes a very important part of the piece. And I don't feel that anything gets to a point of preciousness until it's done. Because sometimes you think that there might be that presence to the work, and then it's not there, and then sometimes it surprises you, and you don't anticipate that you're going to really engage with it in a way, and you do. So you really don't know until the end of the process whether something has that quality or not, and you don't want to be inhibited. You need to sort of you need to sort of solve those problems if you notice that you're feeling preciousness within the process. You need to either just amass more material. You just somehow have to get to a point where you can be a bit reckless.
Yeah, and I definitely stumbled upon that problem, I guess, with the first crocheted cotton piece that I made, and it felt like this beautiful object in itself, and I was like, oh, this isn't exactly what I wanted it to be. So I guess I really wanted to, it was a bit of a hurdle to get over, because I had to kind of part with the surface that I like labored in. Mm-hmm. So then I just felt that like slathering on oil paint and completely covering the surface sort of solved that problem. Like, just my application was reckless, and then it kind of balanced out somehow.
So it's kind of a gesture against like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of scary, but.
Yeah. 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 Well, I can't. I mean, you say that you're not precious, but I can't imagine there's just like not a little bit of tension when you take your router. I mean, it must be exciting, like a little bit.
It's exciting in a sense, but it's not. It's my least favorite part in my practice. Like, there's a chance that I can ruin something I worked on for 3 or 4 years, and then I have to start again. Like, that's not fun. But I guess I'm trying to say that I don't have that moment like Angela did, where I was like, oh, this is this is it before
Yeah.
it's done. It's like, no, this is a stage, and then when it's done, it's definitely precious because they're extremely vulnerable. They
Yeah.
scratch easy, and like there's a sense of precious at the end for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Colleen, I have a kind of a clarifying question about the process. I remember you talking about how you were working with like the textiles, and you were dyeing them or staining them, and they were bunched up, and you were manipulating them and then hanging them to dry. But I think I missed a step where are you then using those? Oh, here's the thing. Are you then using those as sort of models that you're then painting, or are those actually the materials that then become cut up and stretched and put onto the frames?
Yeah, the latter.
Okay.
Yeah. There's been moments in new ways of, say, hanging where I'm noticing just like ways where I can achieve more of a brush-like quality. And I think what's interesting to me is this avoidance of this tradition, but this so I'm not using that. It's interesting because right now I use brushes and paint with some sculpture work that I'm making. But with the actual paintings, I'm soaking them and hanging them and then working with that material.
And then it becomes stretched.
Yeah, I have a certain limit with it. If I'm making a body of work, so the work becomes connected through this limit of material that I'm using. And I guess within like a craft or quilting tradition, I generally start larger and can start to work down to some smaller works where the offcuts become from a previous work becomes activators for the next process.
And then, so let's say in one of these works, how are the different elements attached together?
They're sewn, yeah. So these are offcuts from so these are just like scraps that there's a studio shot in there somewhere where there's just like scraps all on my studio floor, and it's just really interested in this idea of like economy and reuse and just really stretching the means of the material, yeah.
Colleen, there's something that I've been wanting to ask you, actually since I first became familiar with these new works, and that's, and I'm sure you've answered this question a million times just having defended your MFA thesis, but why do you why do you stick with the standard formatting of the conventional frame?
It is the I'm interested in continuing to reference painting, but primarily it's part of like the presentation and the trompe l'oeil that's happening, because it's really dealing with this this print-like effect that I'm achieving through the staining of the wrinkle or the fold, and then when the fold is stretched flat, it provides a dynamic like quality where it's both flat and with the it plays into the illusion in a satisfying way for me, and I've experimented with different modes of installation with working without the frame, and I think in the end the decisions have there's conceptual reasons for experimenting in certain ways, but generally the decisions that I end with are aesthetically based, where it's my aesthetic preference. Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to respond to that really quickly from something you said yesterday about that you like this wet quality, that sometimes like people want to see the back of the works, and that's kind of not necessarily like. I feel like that's a nice part of maybe the stretcher. It kind of acts as this hiding apparatus for any lumps or kind of disruptions in what becomes quite a a smooth kind of surface, and that wet quality that you said you liked was sort of a nice way of putting it, because there's, in a way, like they still have so many secrets, so even though you know that it's kind of sewn together, it's sort of I think by like holding back the whole sort of lumpy object that it is and sort of seeing it as this this stretched surface, that is what does draw the what that I think you're for me. Yeah. I do want to see the backs, but I know that like I'm satisfied by not seeing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I haven't. We were talking about this yesterday, but
Illusion? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't seen them, and any of us. So, yet, and but from an image or of the work, they are highly illusionistic, and it's unclear as to how they're made. So, yeah.
Maybe all of our work might
Yeah.
act like that.
But not the sort of trompe-l'oeil thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was of interest with me, just in this problem of like with a painting and maybe even just time, like with a video work, you have this like time duration where people can engage with the image, but with a painting it can be such a quick read, and I was really interested in trying to slow that down, like just a sense of speed. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're actually going to open up for questions now. And so if anybody has any questions. Yeah.
Jeremy, because the process is over such a period of time, and of course we grow, fairly rapidly these days, and there's an inherent historic aspect of it. Then, do you get down there sometimes and either feel nostalgic or have regrets, or you've changed so much in the color, or how do you feel when you get down there?
No, I don't have regrets. There's a part of me that wants some instant gratification sometimes, to make something be like, oh, I'm done and it's done. But usually when I set a painting in motion, it'll be in that moment in time when I'll be inspired by whatever colors to do that, and then it's just, I got to follow it through. Like, there's no way to rush it. So, even though, say 2 years ago I wanted to do an orange painting or whatever, and maybe now I'm sick of orange, I still gotta, for me to finish that painting, it's gonna take that time. So it's not, it's just like, there's no way around it.
And do you feel surprised sometimes? You forget certain things that are down there?
No. Well, I keep like kind of a loose record of what I'm doing in the studio. I've index cards and things that kind of keep track for consistency and stuff. So I usually have an idea. But on the works that were more of a marbled effect, I don't know what I'm going to get. So that's where the surprise comes in. And there's a certain, that's my instant gratification. Instead of taking like years to paint these ones that are more loose and abstract, I can do one in a month maybe, just from slopping on paint here and there. So that's my instant gratification.
I wanted to ask this lady, I guess I don't understand.
There's three.
Which lady?
Which
the redhead.
Oh.
Sorry, I didn't, Angela, sorry.
That's okay.
I guess I didn't understand how you actually make these things. Do you just make acrylic strings and crochet the strings?
Yeah. I can't tell you all my secrets.
Okay. So you mix up paint and make acrylic strings, and then take those just as wool fibers, and then crochet that.
Yeah, I'll mix probably minimum of 2 liters of paint to start a piece. And then I squeeze out the paint into strips.
Okay.
And
And without compromising your integrity on your technique, do you just use regular crochet needles?
I do, but I've actually been thinking a lot about potentially like fabricating my own out of wood or something, because I'm using metal crochet hooks, which is just, from the craft store Michael's, but I have seen wooden crochet hooks and bamboo, and so actually I've been thinking about looking into those. But yeah, I'm using regular hooks. Right now I'm just working with typical kind of yarn.
Okay,
size.
and then just one last one. If you're hanging it on the wall, I mean, how structurally stable are they? I mean, if you're to hang a blanket on the wall, it would sag quite a bit.
Well, I've created a hidden structure underneath that supports them.
Okay.
I really liked the idea of just having the paint on the wall, but it's pretty much impossible because I think because they react to room temperature and whatnot, and they will sag. So, which is nice on its own, but
well, if you're
for archival purposes,
yeah, you might get tired if you spent 10 grand on it and it sags in a few years' time.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So they're pretty stable on the wall. They don't have any.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Since I'm right here, I might as well grab this. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, Landon.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see you. I guess I really was struck with how you've all turned away from classical figuration of any kind, although you could argue these are all pictures and that they all have an image. But it would be interesting to hear some thoughts about why, or if you think that you've rejected sort of figuration. And the other one would be, what is the historical sort of precedent if you consider these to be abstractions?
I absolutely rejected figurative work. Not because I have anything against it. It's just I didn't feel I had anything to say to that. And what drew me then to abstraction was the freedom of it.
Yeah.
I can do anything and sort of speak about things that don't have language. They don't have narrative. They don't have there's there's a lot of pleasure in my paintings, and I don't know how I could render pleasure. You know what I mean? So for me, I was just naturally drawn to abstraction. And as far as precedent, as far as work with me, the work at an ASCAD, there's obviously thick paintings. I'm not the first guy to do a thick painting. So there's Eric Cameron, obviously there's people who in my genre or whatever, there's precedent for sure.
And I know for myself, the point where I kind of felt a weight lifted off because there's so much kind of pressure I felt in art school to represent something. So I guess the point where I felt or decided I'm going to be a painter was a really kind of a moment where everything lightened up, and then also the moment where it's I'm going to deal with abstraction because of what Jeremy said. There's this freedom to address kind of everything and anything, but not depict it, which can be seen as easy. But I don't know, I almost feel like dealing with shapes and color can be really complicated. It might be harder.
Yeah, it's harder to do a really good high realistic painting. It's harder to do that technically maybe, but once you learn it, then you can do it. So it's harder to do a really good abstract painting in the same kind of level of success as far as conveying what you're trying to communicate.
I think for me, I was thinking a lot of a sense of openness and a way of working with a visual language and presenting it to an audience so that there was no right or wrong way. I wanted to pull back from directing the viewer into them sort of having to get into my own experience or my own way of thinking, and I wanted to really like open it up so that they could have a visual experience, and it wasn't right or wrong, and that was important to me when I became more and more immersed with abstraction. Yeah, do you want to go with that?
We'll come around that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it could be a historical connection. I was going to say you missed the figure in my work because the runner, but.
What's that?
I was going to say you must not mean me because there was the runner was the figure in my work. But I guess maybe I was going to make the connection to just the scale of my work kind of has this figurative physical connection to what is a human being as a viewer. So in a way, like I personify my paintings to a certain extent, often just because they do become quite a large physical presence. And maybe that like, as far as any clear representative figure, it might, maybe like it's the subtlety that I'm after of that kind of physical relationship, where I think that maybe the historical kind of scale of that immersive sort of relationship with the painting, I could sort of relate to that being sort of a way I see figures in my work.
In terms of like history for me, I thought I was thinking about abstraction as having at one point this idea of it being something that was old, and then thinking about a lineage of art history, and then really thinking this is not old at all, this is actually quite new, and that there's a lot of breadth to explore and terrain to discover these new possibilities of picture making. So that was an interest for me.